What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with Real Fitness, and we're back again with special guest Harrison. How do you, man? Is it Kuhn or how do you say your last name?
I say
I don't want
Kuhn.
to butcher it.
I don't
Kuhn.
know. I
Kuhn.
say Kuhn. I'm not sure that that's right, honestly. I think even people in my own family say different things. So I go with
Kuhn.
Kuhn
All
though.
right.
This is
So whatever
Harrison
you want
Kuhn.
to do is good.
this
Harrison
is
Kuhn.
twice now. We did the same thing.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're here with
exactly.
with Harrison Kuhn, our resident athletic trainer at Real Fitness, and he has his own practice. So basically, he deals with all things injuries. But I'll let Harrison kind of introduce himself and further explain what he does, who he works with, so you can better understand what an athletic trainer is before we get into things.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I mean, athletic trainer is kind of confusing because when you hear athletic trainer, if you don't have experience with an athletic trainer, you just think it's someone who trains athletes. So it's not so much that I'm doing, high level strength training and, plyometric training. It's more of what we do is it is a rehabilitative role. It is an injury specialist role. So if you ever watch, football game, today's Sunday, football's on. If people are, watching football games, someone gets hurt, the first person that runs out there to check on the athlete, that's an athletic trainer. So you kind of see injuries from the moment that they happen, and then you help rehabilitate that athlete from that day all the way to the day that they can play again. I went into
Mhm.
private practice like 7 years ago, out of that system into more of a system where I could help anybody, not just athletes. And so what I do now is basically helping people that have typically failed a lot of other types of treatment. So they've tried the doctor route, they've tried maybe chiropractor or acupuncture or massage therapy or physical therapy or all of the above, and nothing's really worked out for them to have like long-term success. So that's usually the person that finds me, and then I help assess where they're at and help them, start to improve their movement, improve their symptoms, and get back to doing hopefully some sort of active lifestyle, right? Whether that's, surfing or golfing or, taking classes at Real Fitness or whatever they like to do. I help kind of facilitate that rehab back from, painful state to a high level performing athlete or just person.
And you've been doing it. Harrison's done a great job, not only on our clients, but I'm pretty sure he's worked with all of us. Like I know each one of us as trainers, we get hurt too, and Harrison's helped all of us. So definitely, we all give Harrison our stamp of approval. Many of our members would too. And today we're focusing on all things knee pain. This is the knee pain episode where. And all of us on here, well, not Harrison. Harrison's a young guy, but all of us are over 40. So, man, you're over 40, like you've dealt with knee pain for sure. And to start things off, Harrison, what are the most common types of knee pain that you see that people come to you with?
Yeah, the most common that I see, especially in the athletic communities, is like patellar tendonitis, I would say. So that's the tendon that basically starts at the bottom of the kneecap and then it attaches to the like top part of your tibia, your shin bone. And that one is really common. That's like if you've ever heard of runner's knee or jumper's knee, that's patellar tendonitis. And it's really common because it's kind of a tricky one to treat. The it's not like anything else where it's like, oh, you just got to get stronger. It's like, and a lot of it has to do with where is the pain and when is it happening. And then you have to be very gentle with how you're, improving. It's not like you want to push through pain on that one all the time. And then some of the other things that I see, I don't always like put a lot of diagnoses on knee pain. Like with knee pain, there's not a lot of like really good diagnosis. It's just like anterior knee pain is the one that you'll see a lot in like from doctors and stuff like that. So I think as a medical community, we haven't done a good job of like giving names to knee pain. But I would say the biggest things that I see issues with are be what I would be what I call like compression issues or where there's too much pressure in one part of the joint. So that can be the inside of the knee, that could be the outside of the knee, that could be the front of the knee or the back of the knee. And that can happen from the tissues surrounding the knee if they're getting really tight on one side. Like a lot of people talk about like IT band issues and stuff like that. That's in my mind just more of like a compression issue of the tissues of the outside of the knee joint. And then you can have the same thing for some people. It's like as they go to straighten their knee, they get pain in the front of their knee or the back of their knee. So depending on where they get the pain at what part of the movement gives me a lot of information. But for a lot of people, they just get these sort of compressive issues where the fluid in the knee can't flow well from the front of the knee to the back of the knee, right? So for example, if I'm going to straighten my knee and like kick out all the way, that is going to basically close the front of my knee. And in that sense, I need all the fluid in my knee to basically move towards the back of the knee. If for some reason that can't happen, because let's say, my shin is not rotating well, like I don't have good range of motion in my knee, then the fluid's not all going to go to the back. Some of it's going to stay in the front. And so I might get that sort of like pinching sensation in the front of my knee. So again, there's not really a good like label for what this is. I think most doctors would just say, oh, it's anterior knee pain. But again, it's like, that's like saying, oh, you have low back pain. It's like, well, yeah, I know, that's why I'm here, right? That doesn't actually tell me what is actually going on inside and like what do I have
Mhm.
to do to fix it. So I think that's the biggest thing with like trying to label the knee issues is it's really hard to do that because we don't have good labeling system, I think. And it's, for me, the more the stuff that I look at is the knee have the movement that it needs to have? Like, are all the bones able to move the way that they need to for the knee to move in a healthy way? And then, I'm also looking at the tissues around that area. Are we super compressed in some tissues on one side of the joint, let's say, maybe, but not on the other side of the joint? So that's how you get these sort of compressive issues where there's too much compression on one side of the joint. And that's where, obviously things are going to break down or start feeling painful over time.
With these common issues, like especially these like compression pain related issues, and taking like us as Real Fitness, the gym, where we have a lot of kind of like people come in, they're doing some group classes, they're doing some strength training, and maybe they might be playing some rec sports. In that kind of crowd, what are like some of the common causes when you see people like that with these knee pain? Like, what do you usually see of like, oh, I guess my hypothesis is this is what's causing these things.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think some of it has to do with their activities, but a lot of it with knee pain has to do with their anatomy, even more so. So, like, for example, ankle range of motion and hip range of motion is a really big deal with these issues. So, if somebody can't bend their ankle at all, like they just have no ankle bend, it's going to be really hard for them to have a happy knee. You know what I mean? Because for that knee to bend fully, safely and happily, that ankle has to bend really well too. So if somebody doesn't have an ankle that's working well, like that can cause a lot of issues, or if they have a really stiff foot, for example. And then the same thing at the hip. If they have a hip that can't internally rotate or externally rotate or bend, it's going to be really hard for the knee to be happy. So the knee is kind of one of those joints that very much relies on the joints around it. So I would say before you even take into account what someone's activity level is, and like this is for the members of the gym, like it might not be what you're doing is wrong, right? Like it might not be that the workout that you're doing at the gym is bad or anything like that. It's just might not be right for you based on your anatomical limitations, basically, like where you don't have good movement. If I had to answer the activities part of that question, um, impact stuff can be really tough for people. Like I think people don't always do a great job of handling the forces of the ground when they leave the ground and then return. So like plyometrics, basically box jumps, hopping, stuff like that, is more likely to go to someone's knee if they aren't strong or well equipped to handle those forces in and around the ankle, in and around the hip, and in and around the knee.
Hmm.
So that kind of
I have a
stuff is the
question.
hardest. But yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so you were talking about how the ankle and the knee, sort of ankle and the hips support the knee, and then it kind of relies on those for. How much range of motion would you need in the ankle in order to say like your ankle's good now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
if it's a limiting factor, what would you say you need in order for range of motion in the ankle to make it no longer a limiting factor?
The best like at home self test I would use would be like a knee to wall test. So that's when you set your foot up basically with your, toes facing a wall. So you'd be very close to the wall where you could even have your hands on the wall. And you would set your foot up, very close to the wall. And then you would basically bring your knee forward right over top your big toe while keeping the heel down. So the heel has to be down, the foot has to stay flat. You bring your knee as far forward as you can, basically, towards the wall. And then you can use the wall as like an anchor point, essentially, to measure from. So I would say for most people, and it's not always the greatest test in the world because there's ways to cheat it a little bit, but for most people, if you're not trying to, do anything crazy and you're just trying to get a good assessment of your ankle range, you want to get about 4 inches away from the wall, with your big toe, let's say, away from the wall. So you could lay down like a little ruler or something like that. And ideally, you'd be able to be 4 inches away from the wall with your big toe and have your knee basically cross over that big toe and make it all the way to the wall. Does that
Wow,
sort of
so
make
four
sense?
inches between the toe and the wall, and your knee needs to travel that entire distance.
That's right. So basically, your knee should be able to pass your big toe by 4 inches, essentially, for what we would call, that's about like probably 10 to 15 degrees of ankle dorsiflexion. That's usually the minimum that I'm looking for if I'm like testing on the table is 10. 20 is pretty ideal. Like that's more like the gold standard, what you're looking for. If you have 20 degrees of ankle dorsiflexion, you are much less likely to get all sorts of uh, issues like plantar fasciitis or Achilles tendonitis or things of that nature. So if you're at home right now and you're listening and you just tried that test and you're like 1 inch away, I would say I don't know that that's like, some people would say that that's like your biggest issue is you don't have enough ankle dorsiflexion. I don't know that I would go to that degree. So I would say, yeah, that I would be just working on every day, like getting that ankle to bend, trying to let my knee go past my toe. And there's other stretches you can do, of course. I think, stretching I'm not a big fan of stretching in general, but in that case, if it was helping you get more ankle dorsiflexion, I think that would be a very worthwhile investment of time. Also, like squats are a fantastic way. Anything really where your knee, because that's essentially a squat, like your knee is going to go forward and you're going to come down and you're going to bend that ankle. So anything where you can get that ankle bent, even like a heel raise, like a calf raise machine, or if you wanted to just do heel raises at your house, you could do your like toes in the front of your foot on a step, maybe if you have stairs in your house, or even a book, and have the heel hanging off the end and just kind of be able to like work on going down all the way. You'll also get some good ankle dorsiflexion that way. But I will say, I'll put a caveat to that, is just like, it doesn't always work where all you have to do is just drive that knee forward. And if I do it a million times, it's going to be better. For some people, like there are dynamics of that movement that have to exist, right? Like the foot has to be able to move a little bit. You can't have a super stiff foot and be driving that knee forward. Like ideally, that foot needs to be able to move, and by that I mean the inside of the foot needs to be able to pronate, and sort of the arch needs to be able to fall a little bit, right? Like that's a healthy thing in order to have that knee come forward. Same thing with your shin. If your shin isn't rotating inward a little bit as that happens, that's also going to cause some discomfort probably, or just like you're either going to be very limited and not be able to get farther, or you're going to have a good amount of discomfort in the knee. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with some of these compression type stuff, is if your knee doesn't have good range of motion, like in that, I mean, if your tibia can't move and I'm trying to, bend my knee, which my tibia needs to turn inward and it can't do that, it stays outward, and I try to bend my knee, it's going to hurt every time. And it doesn't matter how many exercises I do if I'm not actually working on that joint mobility, essentially.
Yeah. Oh,
Hopefully that makes sense. I
that
know.
sounds
Sorry, I
awful.
just kind of spewed a lot at you. But I guess all that to say, it's like it's not like this one thing, this one assessment, this one exercise would be this magic thing
Yeah.
that like no matter what will take care of all of your problems. It's a great thing to do and a good thing to be working on, especially like as a prep for maybe a squat. And then the squat is even better because it's going to be loaded. The heel raise is going to be better because it's going to be loaded. But just to say, like, it's not always as simple as saying that sometimes. And if someone's already tried that at home and they're saying, well, I already tried that and my knee still hurts, I guess I'm just trying to add some color to that person who's listening right now and wondering, well, I already did that. I have great, ankle. And it's like, okay, well, are you getting it the right way? I guess that's the question. Yeah.
Yeah, you see all over social media, there's tons of ways to like stretch this and stretch that, and like negatives and things like that to work the knees and all of that. And a lot of people resort to these things in social media as sort of like quick fixes or something along those lines. What's your opinion on that? Is that something you think that is cool to do, or you're like, well, you maybe should consider seeing somebody that's a little bit more of a professional in person type thing?
Yeah. Um, I think if you know somebody, or you have a good referral or something for somebody who is an expert, I mean, I think that's a great thing to do, just because it's like you don't know what you might be doing otherwise, and if you can just get the right answer right off the bat, like why not start there? But I do think in terms of like social media as a whole, is that kind of what you're asking? And like some of these things where you can like learn a lot and try different exercises through social media. Is that what
Yeah,
is it?
maybe
Yeah.
like how to navigate it, because I always get a lot of
Mm,
people, members that come in and they're like, well, I'm watching this on social media. Have you heard about this guy? I watch this guy, and they
right.
say that. And
Yeah.
maybe like your advice as far as navigating it is like, if they're just for shock value, or if there's really
Mm,
some good concrete stuff that you can gather. Yeah, I
yeah.
don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is just like, what are your thoughts about just the inundation in social media with, when it comes to the rehab
Totally.
stuff?
Yeah. I would say it's kind of like anything else in life, where there's some people that are really good at what they do, and they are well read and they're well experienced, and they there's a lot of valid merit to what they're saying. And then there's some people who maybe as aren't as good. I'll just say
Yeah,
that. But I do think that it's pretty awesome. Like, I'll say this, maybe, even 20 years ago, people didn't really have access to any like information like that, like they do now. I would say it's mostly probably good for people than bad. Like, I'm sure there are cases where someone has gone on Instagram maybe and watched certain videos, or like followed a certain person and said, oh, this looks so cool, I'm going to try this. Or, oh,
yeah,
this person feels like they're speaking to me, I'm going to try this. And it has gotten worse. I'm sure that's happened many, many times. But I'm sure that there's probably been a lot more good than bad. And I think for people to have like a little bit of agency in their own lives, and like in the way that they like can try to like heal themselves, I think is fantastic. I don't think people should be sitting there waiting for a doctor to come save them. And I think Instagram kind of helps people feel like, okay, I might be able to do this on my own. And even if it doesn't like fix their problem fully, if it gets them moving and like trying some new stuff and moving in some different ways, like I think it's a heck of a lot better than doing nothing. So I would say generally my feeling on it is pretty positive. I think it's fantastic that if somebody has the desire to, it's not that hard for them to be able to get online and like find something. And like I said, it might not work. It might make them way better. It might make them worse. It's hard to say. It probably depends on you know who it is and what their issue is. Like, I think there's a
yeah,
lot of it too, where it's like there's some people that are really good and there's giving people a ton of improvement, and there's also might be people that fall into the camp of like, oh, it just didn't work for me. So I think that's it, because again, like I said, everyone's anatomy is different. you know Unless you're getting individually assessed on what your range of motion is, where you move well, where you don't, what muscles are activating well with your nervous system, which aren't, like it's none of it is going to be 100% success rate. um, but I think, yeah, if for the most part, if somebody can like who normally wouldn't do anything, they would just stay at home or just like try to like talk to a doctor or something like that. I think it's fantastic that someone can go online and be working on something within 10 minutes, to try to help themselves. I think that's really good for people to kind of like give them the power back a little bit, and try to do something to help them. And if it doesn't work out, there's always people like me out there who
yeah.
can take a closer look. So
And now with Chat GPT, it's like
yeah, right. I
If
mean,
you know how
there's
to
and
the
like
world is really now your oyster.
yeah,
right, and I
if you
think
know how
there's
to
a
ask
lot
the
of
right
valid stuff.
questions.
Right, exactly. And I think there's a lot of material out there that's like, all right, here's like the three best exercises for knee pain. It's like I just don't. I mean, it's impossible to say, right? It depends on why you have knee pain, right? If you have a jumper's knee versus a medial compression issue, like those are two completely different issues, and there's like they need to be solved in vastly different ways, right? So I think it's hard to be like really lump everything together and just say like these general things of like, oh, this is the best thing you can do for your knee. It's like it depends, like it always depends, I guess. So
Yeah,
with a lot of that stuff, like it's probably not going to make it worse. And if somebody's going to do that versus just sit at home, do nothing, I think, yeah, more movement is better than no movement. So that's kind of how
Yeah,
I
why
feel
not?
with people. Yeah, right. So,
So if somebody did come up to you though, and
mhm.
they're excited about starting running, sports, uh, and they came for you for advice, like how to avoid any knee situation because I'm over 40, but I want to play this sport, or I want to start running. My question is, what can I do to avoid any knee situation? Or,
Yeah. I mean, the best
'cause
way would be just to not run at all. Don't do it.
That would
No,
be
I'm
my
kidding.
advice. Just don't
Yeah,
do
right.
that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I kid. I mean, I think I'm joking, but there's some truth to what I'm saying in the sense that like a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, great. Like I want to go run. And I mean, of the options that we have at our disposal here, as, movement professionals, I think it's like one of the worst options, probably like right off the bat, especially if somebody's like, well, I'm like 40 pounds heavier than I want to be. Like, I want to get back in shape. I think that's the classic get back in shape. Like, oh, I'm just going to go run. I think,
Right.
and probably that's because you, again, have a lot of agency in that. Like, you don't need a bunch of equipment. You don't need, anything like literally just a pair of shoes and go outside and go, which is great for people to have that like ability to just like not have to rely anything or like make a crazy investment. But at the same time, I think it's so much ground reaction force, and there's a lot of things you can do. To your question, Lucho, I'll start kind of sharing like what I would be doing if somebody asked me that question, what I would share with them. But I do think it is a higher risk activity, and you can't take away the ground reaction force. That's going to be there. So the only thing you can do is prepare yourself as as well as possible to deal with that ground reaction force. And by that I just mean like every time your foot hits the ground, you have, your body weight, gravity pushing down on you, and you're landing on one leg in a split second, so there's a lot of forces that are traveling up from the ground through your foot up into your hip and above, every step you take, right? So you need to be able to prepare your tissues for that kind of load. So strength stuff is obviously very helpful, right? Like making sure you have strong quads and hamstrings and calves. And like, I would say for most runners, I'm like, if you can't do like 25 pretty good quality single leg heel raises, that's probably a problem, and we're probably going to have some difficulties there. I think, feet, ankle, calf is like very important for running because it's like that's where the force starts. And so if you can't handle it well there, it's safe to assume that your knee is probably going to be next.
And
Um,
just to real
mhm,
quick for the like casual non-trainer listeners. So when you say 25 heel
mhm,
raises, we're talking
mhm,
like your standard calf raise,
mhm.
just like are you on like a step or just on the flat ground?
Even flat ground would be fine. Step would be harder, right? That's where I would, if I was like training over the period of time, I would say, yeah, you want to ideally get that full range of motion because when you're landing, when you're running, usually your knee is going to be a little bit bent. It should be a little bit in front of your ankle. So your ankle is going to be bent, right? So being able to get yourself into a position where the ankle is bent and still be strong, as in you're doing a heel raise with your foot on a box or something and your heel can float, I think that would be better. But even just to get like a broad sense of like we're talking about these like easy to do at home assessments, you could just do it on flat ground, and you want to do it on each leg individually because again, like I think when you're doing running training and you want to run, I think the more split stance and single leg stuff you can do, the better because it's a single leg activity. Like when you're running, there should be really no time in which both feet are on the ground. So it's like if you want to run, your training should adequately reflect those goals, and you should be doing a lot of single leg stuff. So in this case, that would be a single leg heel raise where, yeah, basically you're starting on flat ground. You might have your hands on a wall for support, and you're just basically pushing through your big toe and letting your big toe bend, driving your heel up as high as it will go, and then letting it come back down. And usually you do like 1 second up, 1 second down, and you're just trying to get as many of those as you can. For most people, they might be able to get to 25, but they might stop doing full range of motion. Like they can't get to nearly the top. They might not even be able to get halfway by like the 10th rep. So understand, like being honest with yourself and understanding where you're at there is a good idea. But that's again just something easy that you could do at home just to kind of get a sense of like how ready for this am I. Um, that's like the basic stuff. But I would say even more important than that, and even like a little bit more beyond that, would be single leg plyometrics. I think are kind of the holy grail for me of running preparedness. So what I mean by that is like usually I kind of break it up into two sort of forms, right? More like a stiffer, what we would call like an overcoming plyo, which is what I would consider to be like a hop. So when I say a hop, I mean a jump rope style hop,
Ah,
right? Where you're
right.
not bending a whole lot, you're staying pretty tall and stiff, but you're just doing like a springy hop basically. And that, again, single leg. And for a lot of people, like they might not be able to do that for more than 3 seconds. Either that's because there's pain or that's because they just can't maintain springiness, or it could be something else like they can't stay balanced, like they just kind of fall
Yeah.
to the side, right?
Do you mean like
Um,
off of just one leg or hopping from
one
one leg
leg,
to the other?
just
Got you.
strictly one leg. So I do that
Got
because
you.
it's like, again, you want to be over prepared.
Right.
But yeah, you could do from one to the other. That would be fine too. That's probably a better place to start, just so you're not fatiguing super quickly. But then also, what I look for when I'm seeing that is, like the how it actually just looks. And you could just do this in front of a mirror. But if it's very hard for you, for someone, what you'll see is like their heel will start to drop really heavy, and it'll sometimes like smack into the ground. And when that happens, you'll see the knee kind of doing this like really violent, like reverberating sort of jiggling sort of. And it's kind of hard to explain, but you kind of know it when you feel it, and you know it when you see it. It's like, it feels like your eyes are like, um, like you're running really hard and your eyes are kind of like bouncing all over, right? Like it shouldn't feel like that. It shouldn't look like that. So that's kind of what I look for when I'm looking at that. And I would say, like, again, on the theme of what you can do at home to prepare yourself, a good 30 seconds there. If you can do 30 seconds on 1 foot continuous of that sort of pogo style, jump rope style hop, without letting, your knee going all over the place, without your heel smacking into the ground, without losing your balance, without having pain, that's a really good sign that you might be ready for running. And I know a lot of people that run, or want to run, or in the very beginning parts of running, that can't even get close to that. And that's someone who I kind of red flag as like, okay, they might be coming in to see me sometime soon, unfortunately, so it's like trying to help them get ahead of that by saying, hey, like these are the marks you should hit. Or if I have someone that I'm returning back to running after an injury, that's something that I'll want to see for sure.
Is it a difference if you warm up with shoes or without shoes
That's a good
to get a
question. Yeah. I mean, I think,
better?
from a running perspective, yeah. I mean, I like to do most of my working out without shoes if I can, in terms of like that type of stuff, because I think you just get a much better feel from the ground and a much better connection to your foot and all that. But it
Would
just
that be better
depends.
for
I
the
think
knee?
that would be, it depends if it's somebody who maybe it's their first time doing it. Like if this is like, they're starting this process, I would say probably shoes would be better for the knee, because you're just giving yourself a little bit more cushion. So it's just, you're relying less on the strength, the ability to dissipate force through your muscles, and you can rely a little bit more on other stuff like a cushioned shoe to help dissipate some of that force. So I would say that would be a good place to start, would be if you can do um, hopping with the shoe first, and then the barefoot stuff would be more like end range, like at later stages, they're already back to running. They want to train and, continue to build their tissue capacity. I think barefoot would be good in that sense. But for most people, you'd want to start in a more cushioned shoe just to help them get an extra advantage and take more stress off of the joints and muscles.
I think
And oh,
the
sorry, I
the
was going to, yeah, go ahead.
oh no, did you have something you were?
I was going to finish that with the plyos, because we had talked about sort of the two different types of plyos, one of which being that stiffer plyo like the pogo. And then there's also what we would call like a yielding plyo, or like just a bendy plyo, if you want to call it that. So I always give somebody who's going to run a more of a bendy plyo as well. And so that might be like what I would call a jump and land, something where you're like, imagine you're just jumping off of a tall box, let's say, like a 24-inch box. And so how you'd want to land, you would not want to land very stiff-legged, because that's just going to hurt or just feel really awkward and crunchy, right? So you'd want to be able to bend a little bit at your ankles, knees, hips to sort of absorb that force, right? Like if you're jumping off that box, you almost want to land in like sort of a bent crouch position, so that you can, again, use your muscles, use your joints to kind of like disperse that force a little bit better. So I'll give somebody something like that, like a single leg jump and land. I think Mike and I might be able to go through some of this stuff later, and we might try to,
Yeah,
show some
absolutely.
video on all this stuff. So everyone who's watching, if they want to get on YouTube and watch there, they can see more specifics of like what that movement would look like. But I think, just for in general, to answer the question about like how to prepare people for running, it would be, number one, make sure they're getting some basic strength in the muscles around the feet, ankles, knees. And that would be, like we talked about, the heel raises, maybe some squats, things of that nature. And then number two would be the more plyometric type stuff. So they would get the stiffer like pogo hops, and then like a bendy plyo, like a jump.
Do you recommend throwing in like skater hops, like lateral type things, or any kind of rotating type of things, or just if you're going to run, stay more in just the sagittal plane?
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I think that's a good thing to do. That would be, again, maybe something like more towards the later stages of like as someone's getting pretty good at, these exercises and getting back to running. I think it's fantastic to train in all planes, any sort of like lateral movement you can do, rotational movement you can do. Because when you're running, there is aspects of all the planes, the sagittal plane where you're going forward. There's a little bit of lateral movement too, as your, pelvis is kind of going a little side to side as it goes over your left foot and then your right foot and then your left foot. And then a little bit of rotational movement. Obviously, your arms are swinging. One leg's back, the other leg's forward. So anytime you can train in multiple planes is a great thing, and that's usually more of like as someone gets more and more progressed, we'll start exploring more three-dimensional movements like that. But yeah, I think that would be a great one to do for sure.
Harrison, you said to avoid running, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that stayed in me right now in this conversation. When you say that, and it's just because of the way the terrain is set up with concrete, and it's not forgiving, and everybody's just vibrating through their body when they're landing. So really, there's no perfect landscape for running. We're not meant to be running every day. Are we just meant to be just more walking and moving without putting a lot of repetitive uh, uh, impacts on concrete or solid ground? Because people do that, and a lot of people do that for their. I think one of the main things that I've heard from people when I would train them that why they run is because that their mind goes somewhere else. They get into a zone, right? But
Yeah.
then they're sacrificing for a benefit that later on is going to bite them in the ass because now they got knee problems. So
So
is it
yeah.
re-educating society, letting them know that we're humans, we're not meant to run every day, or we're not meant to run so many miles a week.
Mhm. Yeah.
Shoes. You got shoes that they say that the flatter the soil, the better for the foot, and then you got more with cushions. So we got so much variables
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
market
it's
this
great.
lifestyle, but this lifestyle is really at the end doing damage to your knee at the long run when you're 76 and you're running for 30 years, and then somebody finally tells you you shouldn't have been running for 30 years because it's not really great for humans.
It's a great
So,
question. I'm glad you asked it because it gives me a chance to sort of clarify. I don't think running is like inherently bad. I don't think it's bad for humans. I mean, obviously, we can do it and we've been doing it for thousands of years, so I think it's not inherently bad. I think it's fine to do. I think why I said that is because for people who haven't done it for, let's say, 15 to 30 years, who are just like, oh yeah, I used to do this in high school and I just pick it up. Like I got shoes at, on Amazon, and like I'm good to go. Here we go. I think it's just, again, not so much that the running itself is bad. I think, or that any movement or any type of movement is bad. I just look always at risk versus reward, and I look always at the individual person and think about their capacity and like what are they capable of, what are they trained for thus far, right? So I guess what I mean by that is there's a lot of different options if somebody wants to get like a cardiovascular exercise in, that would be a lot less stress on the joints and a lot less impact, right? Like biking or swimming or the row or, the ski or like all those things, they don't have their body leaving the ground and then returning, hundreds or thousands of times. So I think that's sort of what I mean by that is just like if somebody is, let's say somebody is well prepared, they're doing all this stuff we just talked about. They're doing the strength work. They're doing some plyometric training. I think, and they're being smart about how they gradually return or like gradually start a running program. They're not just like, all right, great. Like I'm going to go run 10 miles on the first day. I think that's totally fine. If they're going to be smart about it, if they're going to train well, like I think people should run. I think running is fantastic. I think sprinting is fantastic. I just think a lot of people see that as the easiest entry point to exercise. And if they haven't done exercise or they haven't trained their body in other ways, it's one of the like most dangerous probably to start up with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
well, we've always been running, but before we ran for survival, right?
Hmm.
Hunting.
Yeah.
Now we run for recreational and
Right.
fitness. But how
But we
much is
never
too much?
stopped running back then. I
No.
think that was the biggest thing is like, let's say, Lucho 3,000 years ago at age whatever can, 50 or older can run no problem. But Lucho has always ran. Lucho ran when he was 40, whatever. Lucho ran when he was 30, whatever. Lucho has run since he was able to run at, 4 years old or whatever, right? I think the problem is we run, through grade school, whatever, high school, and then we stop and we go to college or we get a job and we're at a desk for 20 years. And then we look at ourselves and we're like, oh no, I need to do something. I need to get myself in shape. Well, I know how to run. Let me do that. Right. So I think if you're continuing to run and that's like a stress that's not novel to your body, that's like a stress that your body's used to and you do all the time, it's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, yeah, there's inherently more load to the joint associated with that type of activity, but if your body is equipped to handle it, it shouldn't be a problem. I know people that run well into their 70s and even some into their 80s, and aren't having pain or anything like that. But I think it's just that's sort of what I mean is if we stop doing it for 20 years and we add 20 to 60 pounds of extra load on the joints and then we try to do it again, it just creates an opportunity for higher risk. That's all.
Disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just don't run a marathon, after you're 40 if you've never run before because it's a bucket list thing or something like that. It's like find
Totally.
something else.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
or
What
just
do
Yeah,
you think
I would
take
about?
your
say,
time and start and like give yourself a year to ramp
Sure.
up. Do a good
Yeah.
like come to Real Fitness, get a good personal trainer, start building your strength, start building your plyometric capacity, then
There
start
you
your
go.
running program after that for you've been building your strength for a couple months. Now I'm going to start doing, maybe 4 miles a week, 4 days a week. I'm just doing 1 mile at like a pretty, just build over time. Like
Right.
there's
Be
like
smart about it.
ways to be smart. It's just like anything else. Like if somebody hadn't done resistance training before and they saw their friend, squatting 225, it's like, okay, well, you shouldn't get under the bar and do 225 until like, let's see, can you squat even without any weight first? How does that
Yeah.
look? How does that feel? And then maybe we add the bar after a little while, and then maybe we add 5 pounds. It's like we do it smart in the gym all the time. I think people are more smart about it that way, but it's like they don't think about that when it comes to running. It seems like such an easy thing to do that I think people just think it's easy on their body, and for a lot of people, it's just yeah.
What's your thought about like sprinting over jogging? Do you prefer one over the other, or it's just like depends on what you want to do? If you want to run a
Hmm.
marathon, maybe you should think about jogging more long distance. If you want to get like leaner, maybe sprinting, and you're not necessarily a runner, you want to get leaner using running than sprinting instead of. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think yeah, it's kind of two different buckets for two different objectives, I
Yeah.
guess. I think sprinting is amazing. I think again, it's one of those things you want to like build up to it gradually. But I think yes, you look at like a sprinter, let's say, and you look at a distance runner, and they all kind of look the same, not with each other, but all the sprinters look a certain way, and all the
Jacked.
distance
Yeah.
runners really jacked, huge glutes,
Jacked.
right? It's like super strong legs, very like a little bit
Lean.
bulkier, yeah, very lean in like their core area, but like more muscular, I would say. And then the distance runners
Definitely.
usually look very slim, and they're always really light because that's very helpful when you're distance running, because again, the more load you're carrying, the over time, that's just a lot of steps, a lot of ground reaction force. So I think you can kind of see that and see like, oh, okay, you can see that it has different stresses on the body. I think sprinting is fantastic for maintaining athleticism and springiness. And like Lucho said, we've been doing this for a long time. So our bodies are well capable of handling it if we've, if we've trained for it, basically. But yeah, I think sprinting is fantastic. It's really good for your tendons. It's really good for your muscles to be working at higher speeds like that. And it's really great, obviously, cardio as well. So doing stuff like that where it's like almost anaerobic, right? Or where it's breathless, essentially, you're giving all out effort has tons of benefits. And there's also, a lot of known benefits with like zone 2 cardio where you're, staying in a not crazy high heart rate and you're able to do it for extended period of time. So I think both are fantastic options. I personally prefer sprinting. I think I get a lot more out of it in a shorter amount of time. It's also just a personal thing. Like I just don't necessarily love running for distance, but there's absolutely benefits to both of them, and they're just different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the kind of like reframing, and not to make this whole thing about like we're gonna bash on running, but I think reframing running is
Yeah.
definitely something that would be very, very helpful for the general public. Because I think as trainers, we've all, I mean, I've physically seen where people will walk into the real fitness and they will talk about how they want to do, let's say, classes or something, and they'll see it going on, and maybe there's someone doing a box jump. And one of the things I'm not ready for that. I'm not there yet. And literally I've seen this happen, and then I will see them like jogging outside, and I might run into them and be like, oh yeah, I'm getting ready, I'm getting in shape for the gym. And that's for years. I think for
Twice.
like
It's the
running
other
has
way
always been
around.
that thing. It's almost like when you played a sport growing up. We like the first day of practice would be like, we're gonna run. We got to get you in shape. We're gonna run. So it's always been like associated with almost everything physical. First you run, and then you do the thing. So it's like in our minds, and like it's good that you brought up jumping to prepare for running, because normally it's always the other way around. Most people are going to associate, I'm going to run first to get ready to jump, when really it's running, like you said, it's going from one foot to the other thousands of times. You're not going to come to a group class and jump thousands of times, or jump thousands of times in a personal training session, but it is, I think, like it's like a serious re-education and reframing of running, because it was like in grade school, we just run. You would just be like, all right, guys, go run a mile, whatever. And you'd bang it out because you weighed like 90 pounds and it was whatever. But it is, running is such, as trainers, we've all seen it where someone is like, well, I'm going to start running the neighborhood to get in shape to train with you. When you're like, that's really more of an advanced activity. You need to train with us first and then start to implement running. So that is just like it's such like it's hard because we grew up. It's everyone who did sports. It was like day one. You know what? We're just running today to get you guys in shape. So it is like but it's good to like, people should know these things. Strength training, I think, it's strength training is known as you need to strength train to be a good runner, but also jumping is another thing that's not in that piece of the puzzle. That's usually thought of as like more advanced. So
Yeah.
it's
It's
like
the other
Yeah.
way
it's a
around.
big
Yeah.
re-education that's needed.
You're right.
Like,
Yeah. I think, and that's part of it too, is like to the untrained eye, yes, like running looks like it would be less stress on the body versus like doing a pogo hop on one leg, let's say, right? And there's truth to that. But you're not doing pogos, like you said, for 20 minutes, right? Like you're doing them for like 30 seconds maybe, right? So the idea is sometimes like you do the harder thing to train for, to get your body to have the capability to do the thing that doesn't look like it would be harder, but you're going to be doing it for so much longer and so many more ground contacts. So yeah, I think you're right, but I think that's also very much up to us to start sharing that with people, because it's like you said, we've all done it, we've all ran before, so it feels like and for a lot of people, maybe they've never done a squat before or a deadlift, and that feels way scarier than running, because it's like, well, I know running, I've done running. So I think, yeah, it's up to us really to help educate our clients and the people that, there's a lot that you can do to prepare yourself for that. And if you don't do that and you're trying to do running and then do other stuff, like to our point, like it's kind of in the reverse order.
is there?
I
Oh,
I had
go ahead.
I have a question kind of going off of what Lucho had said, but before that, I just wanted to point out, I just thought about this, but so my dad is 6'2". He was usually like north of 200 pounds, 210, 215, maybe 220. But for the last, and he's 72, I think. For the last few years, he'd been talking about needing a knee replacement. And like my dad's dad, my grandpa, he had both his knees replaced. They're bigger guys, and bigger guys just kind of have that, tend to get into knee issues. My dad was doing it, like he worked out, did various strength training, but it was just kind of this. It seemed inevitable. He's like, I'm going to need a knee replacement. He simply lost weight. He lost like I think he's down like 190 or something. He lost like maybe 20 pounds, all knee pain gone. So it's one of those things where it's also like sometimes it's like that low hanging fruit of,
Hmm.
we talk about all the training and all that, but literally my dad just lost weight. He started to track what he ate, and for the first time ever, and he lost weight, and now and again, it's like at the age of in your 70s, you don't want a full knee replacement. But it was just one of those things of, it's like the low hanging fruit, and like he just simply lost weight. And he wasn't, my dad was never an obese guy. He just had some excess weight, and that excess weight being gone, boom, knee pain gone, doesn't need a knee replacement. So it's interesting to always kind of think about that, the low hanging fruit of what can really change the game, and what's putting pressure on your knee. But what I wanted to kind of elaborate on with Lucho's original question of kind of getting into a fitness routine of, if I want to avoid knee pain. So I kind of just wanted to dig into that, because I know you said uh, calf raises, kind of setting a standard of 25 calf raises was kind of you're in a good place. And then getting some, like being able to do single leg plyometrics, single leg kind of like pogo hops for 30 seconds was what you said.
Hmm.
Anything else that you would add into that? Like if someone was to, like, I'm an LA fitness guy, and I want to, what's a kind of get a good, what are some other things I'd want to check off?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think, those specific things too, I was kind of more gearing towards running in particular. But I mean, obviously fantastic stuff for just happy knees generally. Um, if you're talking about building a program for a happy knee, right? I would say, you want to do some sort of full range of motion activity is a great idea. So you can get that in a lot of different ways. The like leg press or squat is a fantastic way to get that. The leg press might even be a little bit easier because you can change the weight. So if you're new to this, like you could have a pretty light leg press, whereas like if it's, if you're, let's say you're a little overweight and you're trying to get in shape, squatting is kind of tough because it's a little hard to like unload yourself. There's ways to do it, obviously, but I think the leg press can be very helpful for that. And then I would say, the knee extension machine is probably the greatest thing, the best friend of any person's knee. Like knees absolutely love the knee extension machine. Especially we talk about things like, avoiding patellar tendonitis, runner's knee, jumper's knee, having a really strong quad muscle, quadriceps group muscle, is a fantastic way to do that. And so that's the one where you're seated and you start with your knee bent, and then you're kicking into a bar on the front of your shins. Yep. And then you're trying to get your knees as straight as can be. You can do isometrics there, which is where, you put the pin pretty heavy and you don't even actually kick out, like it doesn't actually move, but you just kind of push into the bar and you don't go anywhere. That's a fantastic way if you're new, just to start building some strength in the muscle and the tendon. Or you can just do lighter and go, up and down. Obviously, if you're doing it in a controlled way, that's always better. That's a fantastic choice. You can also do the opposite, where you're doing like a hamstring curl. That's a great choice too. In general, like doing some sort of thing that's like more what we would call like knee dominant or maybe quad dominant versus hip dominant or hamstring on the back of the thigh. So, the quadriceps group, the muscles in the front of the thigh, the hamstring group, the muscles on the back of the thigh, and then the calf muscle group, are the main muscles that cross that knee joint. So making sure that those muscles are strong, that they can handle good amounts of load is a fantastic place to start.
And
And then just making
if you
sure that
sorry,
you're,
and
okay,
just a quick, like, so if you are, let's say it's someone, they got a home gym and they just got some dumbbells, what's a knee dominant exercise they could do in that situation?
yeah, for sure. I would say, anything that's more like squatty would be more knee dominant. And again, it's, you can get into the weeds of like the nomenclature of all this, but essentially if you want knee dominant, you got to let your shin move forward, right? So if somebody has dumbbells that they just got at home and they wanted to try something, I would say just try a squat to start, and then you can grab one of those dumbbells and do like a goblet squat and hold it in front of your chin or your chest, and then do some squats that way, where your goal is to be moving the shins forward as much as possible. That's going to hit a point, and usually, again, this is where we talked about the ankles earlier, where you kind of run out of room there. But that's fine. You just bring them forward as far as you can, bring your hips down, straight down as much as you can. And then on the way up, push through your feet and basically bring your hips back up and forward. So when I say squat, that's sort of what I mean. How I think of a squat is a more vertical descent of your pelvis, of your bottom, basically. And so in order for that pelvis to come down, the knees have to go forward. So whenever you get weights out in front of you, that kind of helps, because it basically pulls you forward. So your body has to sit back a little bit, which allows it to be a little bit easier actually to let your knees come forward and let your bottom go straight down. So you could do that. You could even elevate your heels, would be a helpful way to allow the knees to come forward more, because again, it kind of pushes you forward. So your body has to then react by sitting back a little bit more and coming more straight down. Also, it kind of takes away the ankle restriction factor a little bit. So if you do have tight ankles, that would be fantastic. You can get a wedge, like a ramp to put your feet on, or you can even use some of those like dumbbells. If you have like pairs of 5, you can put your heels on the handle of the dumbbells and your toes on the ground. And that would be a way that you could, get creative with those dumbbells. I think wall sits are a really underrated exercise for building quad strength, leg strength. They're not so much fun to do because they burn like crazy, but especially if someone's looking into like running or just has a cranky knee, that's a great place to start. And hopefully Mike and I can go through that one and kind of show. But what really matters on that one is obviously how high up or down on the wall you are. And if nobody knows what I'm talking about, it's basically you have your back on the wall and you have your feet out in front of the wall a little bit, and then you basically slide your back down the wall to a place where your thighs start to burn a little bit, and then you would essentially just hold that position. And then where your feet are going to matter quite a bit. So essentially, you typically want the knees to be sort of right on top of the ankles. So your shins should be vertical. But if you have a really cranky knee, you can also do it with your feet a little bit out in front of your knee, and sometimes that will take a lot of stress off the knee. So, and this goes for you guys and other personal trainers that might be listening, is like starting with a wall sit where the feet are a little bit out in front of you. Like you can still actually get a decent quad burn if you're hanging out there long enough, and that might be the only thing someone can do to avoid like stress on the front of the knee, but still get a nice quad burn, because you're not actually like the knee's not translating forward. So that's what we call a negative shin angle, when basically the shin is tipped backward. So the knee is behind the ankle. And then obviously the vertical shin, like I was talking about, is a great place to try to start. And then as they go, they can start to get their knees more in front of their ankles and on top of their toes. And that would be more advanced, more bend in the knee, more strain on the front of the knee and the quads. So those would be some things that they could do at home. They could also do some sort of like I would work the hamstrings a little bit. It might be a deadlift that they could do with those dumbbells. They could do some hamstring work lying down on the ground with a bent knee, just digging their heel into the ground, something like that to kind of fire up the hamstring. They can do that with a foam roller or with a slider. They can do basically bending the knee with their hips a little bit off the ground. So like stuff like that, and hopefully Mike and I, like I said, can go through that. But those would be some easy ways. The good thing about this type of training is you don't actually need a ton of equipment, especially early on. It's just about doing things the right way and understanding how to use that load that everybody has, right? Towards the muscles. So split squats are a fantastic option. That's going to be more like knee is going forward. And so in that sense, for someone who that might be uncomfortable for, you would have to modify that a little bit. But our goal is always to have someone be able to bend all joints, full range of motion, and have good strength. And I think that's where we've really seen people struggle when it comes to knees, is like when they come in and, we've talked about this a lot as a staff before, but, they've been told at some point in their life, to never let their knee go forward past their ankle, on top of their toes or anything like that. And so it's as if telling someone like never lift your arm above your head. It's like, okay, well, is that person going to be able to lift their arm over their head in 3, 5, 10 years? No way. It's just they're not going to have the mobility. They're not going to be strong there, and it's going to lead to problems. So in any joint, we want that joint to have full range of motion. We want to be able to move in all sorts of different ways. And so that's something that we obviously need to start training people into. And that process, if they are very uncomfortable every time the knee goes forward, can take some time to get them more comfortable there. But the goal is always to give people back full range of motion, full capabilities of their body. So
On,
Nice.
on everything that we're talking about, like the benefits of the movements, the warm up, the activations, the knee pass, is let's see if I can say this right. Everybody has different like foot where they have like flat, arch, high calves. Does Can that play a factor in the outcome of knee issues?
absolutely. That's a great question. Yes. Someone with a higher arch is usually someone with a stiffer foot. The bones don't move as well. So that person's usually going to have a tougher time doing squatting type activities. Their ankles usually won't bend as well because in order for the knee to go forward, like I was talking about before, that arch has to sort of drop a little bit. The bones of the foot have to mobilize, and the shin has to mobilize. So somebody with a very high arched foot is usually someone with a very stiff foot, which means that the foot can't move, which means the shin's not going to move very far forward. So that person is going to have a tougher time usually, getting that to happen. It doesn't mean that they can't, right? It doesn't mean that they can't do this stuff. It just means that they're structurally going to have a tougher time with that. Now, there's advantages to having a higher arched foot. I'm not saying a flatter foot is better, but it's just like, the same thing with the flat foot, right? The flat foot is going to have an easier time getting that mobility. They're usually, it's like a hypermobile foot is what I would call it. So they're able to get the shin to come forward because that foot can drop well, but they might also struggle in different things in terms of creating stiffness, right? So it's like they have a very mobile foot. They might not have a very strong, stiff, they have a tougher time creating stiffness when it's time to like create a lot of force. Like if they're jumping or sprinting or something like that, right? So yes, Lucho, if you have a higher arched foot, a stiffer foot, it's going to make it different but harder usually to get that mobility. And if you have a flatter foot, that person might have an easier time being able to get their knees forward. So it's a great point, and it's something that we have to obviously take into account when we're assessing our athletes.
Yeah, we got
Yeah,
to.
I would just add, like I fail like every ankle mobility drill ever. Like whenever I've been at like personal training seminars and I'm terrible. Like I don't even know. I think I can have my foot against the wall and push my knee and tap, but I definitely can't do 4 inches back. So, but I don't have knee pain. So it's just
Yeah,
kind of like it's so for those out there, just know that if you do, it's not always just because you can't do something doesn't mean that it's because I'm the worst. I got the worst ankle mobility. So yeah.
yeah. It's not prohibitive. It's just right. These are just guidelines, and like again, it always depends. It always depends on the person, and sometimes it's easier when you do have weight. Your body finds a way down and finds a way to bend more under the load. Also, there's just like a lot of different options, like we talked about, using wedges or ramps might be a great choice for someone like you, because then it's like, all right, great, now we can actually let the shin move forward, we can let the knee move forward, we can get a lot of stress on the knees and on the quads without necessarily going into crazy ankle ranges of motion. So it's fantastic, you found a way around that. And obviously, ideally, part of your program would also be a little bit of ankle mobility stuff to try to help yourself get there. But again, humans are amazing. Like we find incredible ways to compensate and to do the tasks that we're trying to do. So it's never like this means you can't do this, or same thing like we talked about with the running. It's like, if you can't do this activity doesn't mean you can't run. It's just like these are things that we've identified to be more helpful to reduce the likelihood of your knee hurting or something bad happening or something like. Yeah,
How
that's a good
about those
question.
knee pains? How about those knee pains that come out of nowhere? Sometimes I could be sitting down here working, and I just lean forward, and all of a sudden I get a shock in my knee. Is it because of
Hmm.
there's no fluids because it's frozen? There's no fluids going
That's
around.
that's very possible. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be happening in there. That could be just, fascia starting to move and then, you're feeling that. But yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of it I think does come down to, your knees stuck in one position for a long time and the fluid gets stuck in that position and you start to move and it's uncomfortable. It could also just be that you're old.
I think
Man,
that's it.
I will testify to like, man, I'm like, because I've known Lucho for a long time. I met Lucho when he was 39, I want to say, and just there'd be things that he would tell me where I'd be like, yeah, whatever. And now that I'm 43, it's just
He didn't
like
believe me.
when I do a good jumping, sprinting workout, the next day when I get out of bed, there's always like a oof. Like
Yeah.
it's like the knees and the ankles, and it's like as the day goes on it feels better, but there is this the territory you start to get into where you get this weird phantom pain every now and then that'll come
Yeah,
and go, and it's just this oof, like, and it's not like an injury, it's just come, you're like, what the hell just happened, and like my knee hurts for like an hour and then it goes away. It's the weirdest.
yeah.
It's yeah, I don't know.
You see, now you
Just
This is what
believe
I
me. Now I
hear.
made a
yes,
believer out of you.
40-year-old nut territory. Yeah,
That's the what I hear from a lot of my clients and stuff is like the day I turned 40, it all
yeah.
went downhill pretty
And
much.
the
So
it's like the warm up pro. It's like now you can't just do stuff. I feel like you have to get really warm now and just get really well prepared to do something athletic versus like back in the day. You'd be like, I think I could go and jump and touch that sign. You'd be like, no, no, let me give me 10 minutes and I'm gonna come back and now I'm gonna try to touch the sign. Like you can't just do stuff anymore.
Yeah, I gotta warm up. I gotta warm up at least a good 10, 15 minutes before I play paddle, uh, because there's a lot of lateral, explosive, forward. You pretty much are all over the plane of motion with your feet and bouncing. And I remember the first time I played, no, like the third time I played, I teared my calf muscle, and that was my wake up call that it's like I can't just do a 5 minute warm up. I gotta do a 10-minute warm up. I gotta do a lot of bouncing. I have to do a lot of bouncing so I can feel comfortable when I do lateral bouncing. Because if I don't, because the thing is, because that was another one. I got big calves, and I noticed that people with big calves, we have a lot of stress in our calves. We carry a lot of our stress, and I don't have no knee problems, but I'll have those shock knee pains. But I think that's coming from my calves because they're so tight. And I remember you ripped me a new one when you were breaking up those tension, and that made me cry. You made me cry, but
I'm sorry.
You
but
made me cry. You
Yeah,
sounded
well,
like,
I still
I
got
was
that
there
video
to
I looked at. But it relieved a lot of pain. No, not pain, but it relieved a lot of tension that I had
Mhm.
in the surrounding area.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, you said something that I thought was really interesting to just make a note of too is, and that's kind of why we talked about with the running, the strength, but also the plyometrics. I think, a lot of people, like, let's say, like we were talking about, Peter, where it's like maybe they go to the gym, like LA Fitness, let's say, and they're using machines and they're doing stuff, squats and like more like, powerlifting or bodybuilding type exercises. And then they think, well, I'm in good shape. I work out 5 days a week. I can go play basketball or I can go sprint. And it's completely different stresses, right? It's like when you have that type of stress, like you can do calf machine all day till the cows come home. Someone might be able to get like 50 calf raises, single leg, perfect range, like no problems. Um, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate well to playing paddle, let's say, or pickleball, right? It's like you can go out there and immediately hurt something because, the stresses and the speed of contraction is so different, right? When you're doing that kind of like quick movement and you're moving side to side, like it just challenges the muscles in such a different way. And it's a lot more tendon focused. So, you can have just like different types of issues. But I think it's just really important to know that, like, if you're doing something for your calf, it doesn't mean you're doing everything for your calf. Does that make sense? Like you can get your calf strong, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be reactive well in terms of when it's under, um, you know, conditions where you're moving your body and all your weight's on your toes and you're bouncing, and you're shuffling side to side and you're rotating and like there's a lot of we move in 3D. right? We don't always train in 3D. So I think there's that aspect of it, like the move, like 3D movement, but then also like your foot hitting the ground really quickly. It's just such a different stress on the calf, or any muscle for that matter. So I think that's just something that's important to mention as well, is like, and I think we do such a good job of that here at Real Fitness, whether it's in the small group stuff, the personal training, or in the group classes of getting a really well-rounded, like we're doing, some strength stuff, we're doing some, lateral movement stuff. Maybe we're doing some like jumping or landing or, high intensity, like max effort broad jump, or maybe it's a speed ladder type of thing. Like we're working on footwork and those sort of quick ground contact. So I think just for somebody at home who's like, how do I prepare my body the best to like not be in pain for any activity that I want to do? Like a really good medley of all of those things is really important to do. And I think, like I said, I think Real Fitness does a great job of that. So
Yeah,
hopefully we
with
can
that,
continue.
I think about it's like working the spectrums. Like, you bring up like the guy who's lifting weights and just doing just standard weights. Great for just general strength keeping. And it's like you're on, let's say this slow strength spectrum over here. But then you also want on the other end do like some fast, quick athletic stuff in similar kind of movements. Like you're doing like this slow, heavy squat. You also want to be able to jump fast in kind of a similar way. And like this spectrum, like you're doing stuff way over here on the slow, heavy end. You're also doing stuff over here on the very light, fast end. And then you bring up the movement, like where all the lifting is linear, straight up and down. Like, and then you might be jumping straight up and down. But then also it's like you want to work the spectrum of your moving in these different ways. And so it's just kind of like I think sometimes for people, you think about make sure your spectrum is like you're not just all in this one area here, but you're like doing stuff over here, 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 here. That's like a good, well-rounded plan if you just look at it of like just what's that like your that old saying, don't what is it? Don't put all your eggs in one basket or
Basket.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
that's
Yeah.
right.
it's gotta be eggs,
Diversifying.
eggs everywhere, eggs
Eggs
Yeah.
everywhere,
everywhere.
eggs everywhere
Taste
when you
the
train. So
rainbow, right?
yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much
yeah.
like that. It's like, or everything in moderation, right? It's like,
Everything in
and
moderation.
I think, and again, or everything, if you want to go beyond moderation, fantastic, good for you. I'm not going to hold you back. But also, like, just make sure that you're having you know, you can't just
That
eat only protein all the time.
right.
You know what I
So
mean?
that
Or
Yes, you
only
can.
carbs all the
so
time.
so that
Yes, you
means
can.
don't run every
You
day.
Just don't
can.
just don't expect to go to the don't be you won't be
Exactly.
regular.
It's going to
Just
be
you'll
once a week. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's to your point, Peter. It's just a great thing to like sort of live by, and just making sure that people are getting a good variety in their training is really smart if they want to do all sorts of things in life. If they want to go jump and touch the sign or whatever, it's like if you're the person who's only strength training, like your risks go up. So again, it's all just about managing risk and
Balancing it out.
and rewards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Cool.
noticed
Well,
that as we get older, as I got older, uh, the workout keeps evolving. You know,
Yeah.
like I can't do the strength stuff every week. I got to do it every other week because it's like it's too much. I can feel it. It's just too much.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there was
Well, I
something
think.
one of the things that the old bodybuilders used to tell me because he was in his 70s. What's his name? I forgot his name, but he was one of the old school bodybuilders from Gold's Gym, and he was in his 70s, and all he said because he doesn't train anymore like he used to when he was in his heyday because he's in his 70s. But he said as long as I get a good pump, as long as I get a good pump, I'm good. I'm good. You know, and that's what it is. It's like when I work out now, it's like as long as I get a good pump and I got my full range of motion and controlled uh, tempo, it's like okay, I still got it. I still got it, and that keeps me happy. But the heavy
I
stuff,
think as you
just like
get better at training, right? Like the more
uh,
years you're in this, like I think it's actually like you don't need the weight as much. Like you're able to create tension within your own body. Like you can make if you're spending a lot of time in the gym, you can make, 10 pounds feel like 120 pounds if you really
Sure.
know how to use your body, right? And
yeah,
manage and create force in the right areas, which I think is great. And yeah, you don't want to be the guy who, you know, only trains one way for 6 years, and it's like those guys are so jacked they can't even like, they can't lift their arms up or like reach behind their back or anything like that. So it's like again, you want to have a balance to what you're doing. And I think it's interesting. You see it in athletes all the time too. Like as they get older and towards the back half of their careers, they usually like really change their body type, right? It's like in their athletic prime, right? When they're like, let's say 25 to 30 or something, they pack on weight. Like they come into whatever league, usually hoping to get stronger and add more weight and add more load. And then it's like as they get towards the back half of their career, usually they start going the opposite way, right? They start trying to get leaner so they can be lighter on their joints so that they can, extend their careers, right? So I think that's really interesting. And I think there's probably a lot to that. And I think the horizon is much different for our general population of clients, right? It's like you can still get to peak strength levels at, 40, 50, even 60. It's like it's just a different timeline. Whereas an athlete, like by the time they're 40, depending on the sport, they're pretty much done. That phase out happens a lot earlier in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I think that's also a good thing for people to understand is that like, there's not one way to get strong and fast. You know what I mean? Like there's just so many different ways. And sometimes, one type of training isn't going to feel as good to your body. And that's something you got to honor and, try to do what makes you feel awesome,
Right. Steve Reed,
Yeah.
who was a bodybuilder who played Hercules. I remember, and this was back in the 90s, where they did an interview with him because he was already, I think he was getting close to 70. And even he said it. He said that, when I was young, it was bodybuilding was my life. It was great. I could do it. But now at this age, it's like he was doing yoga. He was doing Pilates. He was doing more calisthenic stuff. So, and he was like one of those pioneers that shocked me in the 90s when he said that, because at that point it was always about bodybuilding. It was always about resistance training, and his um, commentary about changing it because of how he felt was foreign to me. But as I got older, it starts making more sense because that hunger changes, right? And the effects of the body the sensations that you feel, that is, for me, that was like alarming enough to say, you know what, let me just not keep doing this, because I remember all the old bodybuilders that never changed, that always stick to iron, and then when they reached a certain peak of their old age, they were decrepit, they couldn't walk, they were hunched over. Even Arnold, even Lou Ferrigno. I used to see all these guys, the way they looked at their past their prime, and then like you could see that they're not moving. They're stuck. They got stuck. So all this starts making more sense when I hear these things and when we're talking about these subjects, and the maturity of the body, how it gets. If you don't adapt to the body's changing, biological time, then that puts us backwards, and that's what puts us at risk. But progressive and having these types of chats hopefully brings it to the audience where they have to, they hear these key factors of like, it's not always about just this way of training. You have to evolve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is great.
Harrison, any last tidbits or anything you want to get in before because I know the next segment, Harrison and Mike are going to demonstrate some stuff, but any add-ons before we head over to the demos?
No, I think that's it. I think, just for those out there listening, move your body, don't be too strict about it. Just get out there and start doing stuff. If you feel nervous about that, go seek some help. I mean, there's no better investment than investing in your health and investing in your body, because you only get one body. And when you're not healthy, man, it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much this or that. It's like life is not that awesome when you can't move well and you don't feel good in your body. So I think, it's a fantastic investment. So put that forward and put that first when you
Amen
can.
to that.
Good job.
All
Yeah,
right.
man.
Harrison, thank you so much. A ton of
Thank you,
great
Harrison.
info. I hope everyone out there listening picked up some good tidbits to help you keep some healthy knees for a lifetime. So thank you, Harrison.
Thank you, Harrison.
Thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it.